Picture this. It's the middle of the night, and you're behind the wheel of a massive 18-wheeler. The highway stretches out before you, empty, quiet, unnervingly still. Your headlights cut through the darkness, revealing only fleeting glimpses of the desolate road ahead. There's no one around. No cars. No towns. Just you, the endless asphalt, and the low hum of your engine. But then, out of nowhere, you see it. A figure. Just ahead, standing motionless in the middle of the road. They're not moving. They're just there. Their silhouette is barely visible in the dim glow of your headlights, but something feels off. Your instincts scream at you to keep driving, to ignore it, but curiosity, or maybe a strange sense of duty, takes hold. You slow down, the tires grinding against the pavement as your truck comes to a halt. And then, the figure is gone. Your heart pounds as you scan the area, your eyes darting from one shadow to another, expecting, no, hoping, to see something, anything, that makes sense. But there's nothing. Just the empty road stretching on, swallowed by the blackness of the night. And yet, that feeling, that terrible, unshakable feeling, creeps in, wrapping around you like a cold fog. You can't explain it, but you know you're not alone. What would you do if you found yourself in this exact situation? Would you press forward, hoping it was just your imagination playing tricks on you? Or would you turn around, fleeing the scene as fast as you could? For truckers, the long stretches of lonely highways hold countless stories, some too strange to believe, others too real to forget. And tonight, I'm going to tell you a true story. A story about one of those nights. A story that will make you think twice about who, or what, you might encounter when you're miles from anywhere. It was one of those nights that clung to you. Cold and unforgiving, with a darkness so deep it felt like the stars had given up. I was on Highway 95, a road I'd traveled more times than I could count. But tonight, it felt different. The kind of different you don't notice right away. The kind that creeps in slowly, like a chill you don't feel until it's already under your skin. The delivery was done, the cargo safely dropped off hours ago. Now, it was just me, the open road, and the faint hum of the CB radio. Static mostly, sharp bursts of sound breaking the silence before fading back into nothingness. Normally, I'd welcome the solitude. There's something almost peaceful about a long stretch of road, especially at night. But tonight, there was no peace. Just an odd weight in the air, like the world was holding its breath. I remember glancing at the dashboard clock. 2:37 a.m. late enough for the road to be empty, but this empty. No cars. No distant headlights in my mirrors. Even the wildlife seemed to have vanished. Usually, you'd catch the glow of a raccoon's eyes or the quick dart of a coyote crossing the road. But there was nothing. Just mile after mile of silent blacktop stretching out into the void. And then I noticed it. The silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was wrong. It pressed against me, heavy and unnatural, like a vacuum that swallowed up every sound except the rumble of the engine. Even the usual creaks and groans of the truck seemed muted, like the road itself didn't want to be heard. That's when I saw it. Just ahead, faint and flickering, like a dying light bulb. At first, I thought it might be a fellow trucker pulled over, their hazards blinking in the distance. But as I got closer, the lights didn't make sense. They weren't steady. They didn't follow the rhythm of any hazard lights I'd ever seen. It was erratic, 2 flashes, a pause, 3 more. Almost like a signal. I slowed down, my foot hovering over the brake pedal. Every instinct told me to keep going, to ignore it and push through. But something about the way those lights pulsed kept me glued to them. I leaned forward, gripping the wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The road ahead was straight, but the lights seemed to be dancing, shifting. Like they were moving toward me. I flicked on my high beams, hoping for clarity. Hoping it was just a trick of the fog that had started to gather around the edges of the road. But the beams cut through the darkness, and the lights didn't vanish. If anything, they got brighter. Closer. My pulse quickened, each thud of my heart echoing in my ears. The CB radio crackled suddenly, breaking the spell. Just static, loud and sharp, but it startled me enough to make me jerk the wheel slightly. I reached for the volume knob, my eyes darting back to the road, and that's when I saw it. The lights weren't coming from a vehicle. They weren't headlights or hazard signals. They were, hovering. Low to the ground but not touching it. Shifting and pulsing like something alive. For a moment, I thought I could make out a shape. A figure standing just beyond the edge of my beams, barely visible through the fog. My breath caught in my throat as I squinted, trying to focus. But before I could make sense of it, the lights blinked out, plunging the road back into darkness. The figure was gone. And for the first time in years, I felt it. Fear. Real, primal fear clawing at the edges of my mind. I eased my foot back onto the gas, telling myself to keep moving. Telling myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something was out there, and whatever it wasn't finished with me yet. I've been on the road for years. Thousands of miles, hundreds of hauls, and enough nights alone in the cab to know the difference between my imagination and something real. Trucking isn't just a job, it's a lifestyle. You learn to read the road, the weather, even the silence. And that silence? It's never empty. There's always something in it, a distant hum of a radio station fading in and out, the occasional chirp of crickets, or even your own thoughts keeping you company. But this time, the silence felt heavy. Like it was pressing down on me, daring me to notice. The dashboard clock blinked 2:53 a.m. The stretch of road ahead was endless, and the only company I had was the faint buzz of my favorite station. They were playing an old classic, something from the 80s. My wife loved that song. She always hummed it when I'd leave for a haul, saying it would keep me safe. Thinking of her made me feel grounded, like I wasn't completely alone. But then, out of nowhere, the music cut out. Just static. A sharp, grating noise that sent a jolt through me. I tapped the radio, but it didn't help. Static, then silence again. That's when I noticed the hair on the back of my neck standing up. It wasn't the cold, I've driven through winters harsh enough to freeze a mug of coffee in minutes. No, this was something else. A feeling that crept in like a whisper you couldn't quite catch. My eyes darted to the mirrors, scanning the empty highway behind me. Nothing. Just darkness, endless and unforgiving. I told myself to focus on the road. It's easy to let your mind play tricks on you when you've been driving for hours. But the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. Every mile I drove, it felt like I was being watched. Not the casual glance of a passing driver, but something deeper. Something I couldn't shake. The kind of watching that makes your stomach tighten and your pulse quicken. I gripped the wheel tighter, telling myself to keep going. Telling myself there was nothing out there. But deep down, I knew better. And then it happened. Just ahead, something darted across the road. Quick, too quick to be an animal. My foot slammed on the brake, and the truck groaned to a stop, the hiss of the air brakes echoing into the night. I sat there, staring at the empty stretch of road, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Whatever it was upright. Not 4 legs, 2. Like a person. But it moved in a way that wasn't normal. It was almost like it glided, the way a shadow shifts under the headlights. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed my flashlight. I didn't want to step out, but I had to. If it was a person, maybe they needed help. And if it wasn't? Well, I didn't want to think about that. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the fog. The night was so quiet that every sound felt amplified, the creak of the truck door, the the soft thud of my boots, even my own breathing. I scanned the road, my hands trembling slightly, but there was nothing there. No sign of movement. No tracks. Just the empty road stretching out into the darkness. Then I heard it. A faint sound, almost like whispering, coming from the edge of the trees. It was too soft to make out, but it was there. I shone the flashlight toward the noise, the beam catching nothing but branches swaying in the wind. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my heart racing, my mind screaming at me to get back in the truck. Finally, I turned around and climbed back into the cab, locking the doors behind me. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it was stronger now. Like whatever I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, was still out there. Watching. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to steady my breathing, my hand hovering over the ignition. And that's when I saw it again. A shadow, just at the edge of the headlights. Standing still. Waiting. The silence in the cab was deafening. My hand hovered over the ignition, but before I could turn the key, the CB radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static, sharp and grating, but then came the voice. Low, distorted, and unnatural. You shouldn't have stopped. The words didn't sound like a warning, they sounded like a promise. My breath caught in my chest, and I froze, staring at the radio like it might come to life. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror instinctively, and that's when I saw it again. The figure. Standing dead center in the middle of the road, motionless, bathed in the faint glow of the taillights. It was closer now, much closer than it had any right to be. My hand shot to the door lock, double-checking it, my pulse hammering in my ears. But then, the figure moved. No, moved wasn't the right word. It was running. Sprinting straight at me, its outline jerking unnaturally like it was glitching, flickering in and out of existence with every step. My hand flew to the ignition, and the truck roared to life. I slammed my foot on the gas, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I pulled away. But the figure didn't stop. It was keeping up with the truck, running alongside me, its glowing eyes fixed on mine through the side mirror. I glanced back at the road, my grip on the wheel tightening as I pushed the truck to its limits. The headlights were flickering now, the dashboard lights flashing erratically. And then the engine sputtered. My heart sank as the truck began to lose speed, the sound of its struggle blending with the pounding of my own heartbeat. The figure was at my window now. I could feel its presence before I even turned to look. But I couldn't help it, I had to look. Its face was pale, featureless, except for those glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through me. And its hand was on the glass. Long, skeletal fingers dragging down the window, leaving streaks that looked like ash. The truck shuddered, and the cab filled with an overwhelming stench of decay, so strong it made my stomach turn. And then came the banging. First on the passenger door, then the roof, then the back of the cab. Loud, forceful, like something, or many somethings, were trying to get in. My hands were trembling now, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stomped on the gas again, praying the truck would respond. It sputtered once, twice, and then roared back to life. I didn't hesitate. The truck lurched forward, and I sped down the highway, not daring to look back. But the horror wasn't over. The banging stopped, replaced by a faint whispering. It was coming from the back of the cab. My blood ran cold as I realized, whatever it was inside. The whispers grew louder, turning into laughter, low, guttural, and far too close. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and there it was. The figure, sitting in the middle of the cab, its glowing eyes fixed on me, its twisted smile wide and unnerving. "Why are you running?" it asked, its voice echoing in my head. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The truck swerved as I tried to maintain control, the laughter filling every corner of the cab. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The figure was gone. The cab was silent. The truck was back on the road, the headlights steady, the engine humming like nothing had happened. I pulled over, shaking, gasping for air, my hands still clutching the wheel. I sat there for what felt like hours, my eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. But nothing happened. The highway was empty again, the silence oppressive but normal. Whatever had happened, whatever I had seen, it was over. Or so I thought. Because as I reached for the CB radio to call for help, the static crackled to life once more, and the same distorted voice whispered, "See you soon." When I opened my eyes, it felt like I had been ripped from a dream too vivid, too real. My head was pounding, and my hands were trembling on the wheel. But the truck wasn't moving. The engine was off. I was parked at a rest stop, one I didn't remember stopping at. The first rays of sunlight were creeping over the horizon, casting long shadows across the lot. It looked deserted, but something about it felt wrong. I sat there for a moment, trying to piece it all together. The figure, the laughter, the voice on the CB radio, it all rushed back to me like a wave, leaving me gasping for air. My body was sore, like I had been driving for hours, but I had no memory of how I got here. The last thing I remembered was that voice whispering, "See you soon." My eyes drifted to the passenger seat. And that's when I saw it. A single black feather, lying there like it had been placed deliberately. It wasn't from any bird I'd ever seen, too long, too perfectly shaped, and it seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. But that wasn't all. Underneath the feather was a small piece of paper, folded neatly. My heart sank as I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I unfolded the note. The words were scrawled in jagged handwriting, almost like they'd been scratched into the paper, "Don't stop again." I stared at the note, my mind racing. Was this a warning? A threat? I looked around the cab, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing. Just the silence, the hum of the morning breeze, and the weight of the note in my hand. I crumpled it instinctively, shoving it into my pocket, as if hiding it would make it all go away. I stepped out of the truck, needing to feel the ground beneath my feet, needing to convince myself I was awake, that I was safe. The air was cold, biting, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging in my chest. But then I noticed something else. The ground beneath the truck, it was covered in faint black streaks, like something had been dragged around it in a wide, deliberate circle. I followed the marks with my eyes, but they disappeared into the shadows of the trees lining the rest stop. That was when I felt it again, that same oppressive stillness, the same sensation I'd felt back on the highway. It was like the air itself was watching me, waiting for something. I didn't want to find out what. I climbed back into the truck, locking the doors, and started the engine. The roar of the motor was comforting, drowning out the silence. But as I pulled out of the lot, I couldn't help glancing at the side mirror. And there, just beyond the tree lean, I saw it. A figure. Still. Watching. Glowing eyes piercing through the shadows. I didn't stop. I didn't dare. The road stretched out before me, and I drove, faster than I ever had before. I don't know how long I drove, but when I finally reached the next town, the sun was high in the sky, and the rest stop felt like a distant memory. I parked in a busy lot, surrounded by people, noise, and life. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling. The feather. The note. The figure. They were burned into my mind, a constant reminder of what I had seen, of what had followed me. I still wonder about that night. Was it a nightmare? A hallucination from exhaustion? Or was it something worse, something I can't explain? I don't drive at night anymore. I don't take remote highways. And I certainly don't stop when I'm alone. Because whatever it was, I don't think it's finished with me. What do you think really happened out there on that lonely highway? Was it a restless spirit, a warning from something beyond this world, or perhaps an encounter with something far darker than we dare to imagine? I'd love to hear your thoughts, share them in the comments below. Have you ever had an experience you just couldn't explain? Maybe a chilling moment that still haunts you to this day? Tell your story, I'm sure we're not the only ones eager to hear it. If this tale sent a shiver down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button to let me know you enjoyed it. And if you're hungry for more stories that'll keep you looking over your shoulder, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Click that bell icon, too, so you'll never miss another horrifying journey into the unknown. And remember, the road is long, and the night hides many secrets. Stay safe out there, and maybe think twice before you stop on an empty highway. Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked.